And Gill, who joins us now.
Congressman, good to see you. Look, you were a Wall Street trader for several years. What do you make of this market dip? I mean, should we be worried about our 401ks?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. You know, listen, the stock market does what it does. It goes up some days, it goes down some days. But I think if we zoom out a little bit, President Trump is bringing workers and jobs back to America, and that's exactly what the American people should want. You know, for decades, the United States has had an industrial policy that ships jobs overseas. It ships our manufacturing base to foreign countries, oftentimes countries that we don't align with ideologically or geopolitically. That is a problem. And he talked about this on the campaign trail, both in 2016 and in 2024, that we have got to bring jobs back to the United States. Let me tell you, in fiscal year 2024, the United States lost 105,000 manufacturing jobs. That's on Joe Biden. We have got to end this. We've got to bring our manufacturing base here, and that's what President Trump is doing.
Fair enough. There's ways of doing that. Somebody said this is kind of like deciding to change from driving on the left to driving on the left, driving on the right, and moving the trucks over first. So maybe. But let me ask you, one of the concerns is what this does to the economy in the meantime before we reach the promised land of that new economy. Over the weekend, President Trump, he was asked about a possible recession because of a trade war. And here's what he had to say.
I hate to predict things like that. There is a period of transition because what we're doing is very big. We're bringing wealth back to America. It takes a little time. It takes a little time. But I think it should be great for us. I mean, I think it should be great.
So how do you read that, Congressman? It sounds like he's saying, buckle up. We're going to have some tough months, at least.
I read that as President Trump is being responsible and being very clear with the American people. He's saying, listen, we've got some big changes we've got to make. We have got to bring jobs back to the United States. We cannot allow our heartland to be gutted as it has been for the past several decades. And he's been very clear this is going to require potentially some short-term disruptions, particularly in global supply chains. But this is what is good for the United States. This is bringing us back to a sustainable supply chain basis, a manufacturing base that is in the United States. And that's something that we should all want, Republicans or Democrats. We should all want jobs returning back to the United States. Now, we're not going to get into predicting what short-term market reactions are, but this is the way to get the United States on a good, solid, sustainable, long-term track. And we should be thankful for President Trump being willing to put himself out there and fight for this country's interests and for our working class's interests.
I have one more question about a recession because it's on folks' mind. And just for a second, I want to get investment banker Gill back just for a sec. Moody's Analytics is putting the odds of a recession at 40%. Do you think they're right?
Listen, I'm not going to get into predicting the odds of recessions. I'll leave that to Wall Street. But what I will say is that President Trump has been in office for just over 40 days, and he inherited a sclerotic economy from Joe Biden. Let's just go through a few statistics here. During the 4 years of Joe Biden in office, 60% of the jobs that the United States gained were jobs that were recovery from COVID. We still have a labor force participation rate that is almost an entire percentage point lower than it was pre-COVID. Joe Biden gave President Trump a horrible economic situation with inflation raging and a terrible jobs outlook. So listen, President Trump has barely been in office. He's been there for 40 days. He's implementing an aggressive America First policy that brings jobs back home. That's something the American people have been wanting for a very long time. And I'm glad to see that we have a president who is bold enough and has a bold vision for this country to bring us back to the golden age of America and to protect our workers.
He is certainly determined. It's clear about that. And we're glad we have you today for this budget issue, the government shutdown looming, the vote tonight on the new budget proposal. Now, the Congressional Budget Office says that this proposal will likely result in cuts to Medicare and Medicaid. That's the Congressional Budget Office saying that. And Trump, president, has said those programs are not going to be cut. How do you look at it?
Well, listen, this is a continuing resolution so that we can give DOJ the space and the executive the space that they need to continue identifying waste, fraud, and abuse throughout our federal government. And let's be clear here about Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security. There's an enormous amount of waste that has nothing to do with anybody's real legitimate benefits. We just had a hearing earlier today identifying about over $500 billion every single year in fraudulent checks that are sent out from the federal government, a lot of that coming from those very programs. So cutting this waste out is something that should be a bipartisan, we should have a bipartisan consensus, it should be a bipartisan priority, and if we want to protect these programs, we've got to slash this fraud. And I think that that's something we'll be doing here over the next coming months. But this continuing resolution, it keeps the government open. It provides $500 million for border security so that we can keep our people safe. It provides the biggest pay increase for junior service members that they've seen in 40 years. This is the responsible move from the president, and I support him 100%.
Just want to follow up because you, along with a number of other Republicans, keep mentioning this $500 billion a year number, $500 billion a year in fraudulent checks, but we're not seeing the checks. We're not hearing what agencies specifically. We're not getting any details on the fraud. So what is it?
That's an estimate from the GAO, the Government Accountability Office. They've been very clear, and they talked about this for quite a long time, and these are fraudulent checks that come in several different forms. That's either somebody, and I'll give you an example, for instance, somebody claiming unemployment who has no business being on unemployment. That's somebody who is pretending to be somebody who should be on unemployment and taking their checks. So there is an enormous amount of waste here, and again, that is directly from the Government Accountability Office, and that's what we're going after. But whenever you talk about, we haven't seen this, we haven't had an executive who is serious about right-sizing a bloated, bureaucratic administrative state that ignores the will of the American people. That's the difference right now, is that we have a president who actually cares about rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. We haven't had that in my lifetime.
Has any of that fraud been referred to the DOJ?
We'll see where that goes. I absolutely believe it should. I believe that if you are receiving checks from the federal government, and you shouldn't be, if you are misrepresenting yourself willingly, I think you should be in jail. And I think most people, at least on the Republican side, agree with me.
Texas Congressman Brandon Gill, appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thanks very much. That was great.